Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back VentureBeat's Director of Marketing Technology, Stuart Rogers.
Hello, hello. So, I hope you've all had some caffeine. I'm at the point now in the day where I might have to have an IV of coffee. It'll look a bit odd, you know, rolling one around on the stage, but I'm almost at that stage. So, we're going to start with a talk about how to choose a multi-platform strategy. And to talk about that, I'd like to welcome on stage Emily Greer, co-founder and CEO at Kongregate, and she'll be interviewed by Keith Boesky of Boesky & Co. Please give them both a warm welcome. Thank you.
They're putting the lights in our face so we don't know how many people are out there. Yeah. So I'm excited to be here with you, Emily. And after listening to people talk and Gabe Layden talk about the really old games from 2012, it's nice to be talking to somebody who has games that are older than the underwear that I'm wearing for the first time today. The games, not my underwear.
Yeah, I have some that are newer too, though.
So Kongregate was 2007?
So we founded it in 2006, and then it launched publicly in 2007. But we had some closed alpha players and developers still in like October, December, November 2006. So.
And I think everybody's probably seen it. I think everybody in the world has seen Kongregate. But how would you describe it? What is it?
So it's a open platform for browser-based games where anybody can upload any type of browser game, and then we add a lot of social community features around it, like chat and comments, forums, and achievements that you can collect. We kind of turn the whole site into a game, so it's a sort of a richer experience for players, and then we're very focused on helping developers monetize. So we share revenue on advertising and in-app purchases, and we have a whole wallet system for in-app purchases.
And I told you that I went down and I tracked down some of your quotes before.
Okay.
And I found this one that was a good one. You were talking about browser-based, which I think is kind of disservice to when you say browser-based.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about, not me. And you said that you looked at your forecast for a financial plan for Kongregate in October of 2007. And it's funny, you're laughing because you even said then that it was hilarious.
Yeah.
So you knew in 2007 you were launching this browser-based game company as a subscription business.
No. I can't remember. Let's see. The plan all along was advertising, then virtual goods. So we didn't really understand virtual goods at all, but we knew that it was, very successful in Asia, and we were starting to see virtual worlds and other things succeed in the West. And it was microtransactions, and I had forecast that out without having any understanding of how things actually worked.
And did anything really line up?
So weirdly, my memory is that our total revenue lined up reasonably well, but I thought—
So you're astonishing. You're like a magician.
No, that's dumb luck. Like, when you have like 20 unknowns and you come up roughly with the right number, a pretty high percentage of it is luck. But there is there was thought that went into it. The thing that was completely wrong about it, and that's probably what that quote I was saying, was that I heard microtransactions, we all did, and we thought, 50-cent transactions, $1.50 transactions. We were worrying about how much, the credit card fees were going to be. Right. And then once we opened up our wallet and had a, wallet and the business started, then, it turned out that the average transaction was $20. And it was just, I went around—
games.
Yeah, on browser-based games. I mean, really any free-to-play game. It tends to be, I think it tends towards the $15 to $20, but I actually went around like a Nazi for the whole company and made them like relabel. I relabeled every spreadsheet. I made everybody stop using the word microtransactions because I was like, this is giving everybody the wrong impression. We need to talk about virtual goods.
You're talking about a macro transaction.
Exactly, yeah.
So how many games are you operating?
So we have, We have 100,000 games on the site.
100,000 games.
Yes, we've been getting between 1,000 and 1,500 games.
But Gabe Layden just said you can only operate one game.
Well, there's a difference between hosting a game and operating a game.
Okay.
And that's what he's talking about. So, high percentage of our games are sort of casual single-player games that, launch games or tower defense games or zombie shooters that were, developed by, one or two people and, kind of play through and finish. And, those games are hosted, you enjoy them for a while and then move on. But what Gabe is talking about in terms of operating games is games that are larger and deeper than that, that are long-term hobbies that people play. And this is, the MMOs and the collectible card games and but can include, things like Candy Crush that don't necessarily have multiplayer
You're saying
elements.
casual games, but who's your audience?
So our audience is not the stereotypical casual game audience. Our players
Kind
are
of like calling the transactions microtransactions.
Yeah,
they're rethink casual.
Yes, our players are 85% male, mostly in the 15 to 40 range. I think the average age is around 26 now. And the average age of spenders is higher. If you look at our demographics through ComScore, we index higher for console ownership than either IGN or GameSpot. And they're playing.
But these are casual. So where are these guys coming from? How are they?
Well, game players are omnivores. Just because you play Halo on a console or League of Legends on a PC doesn't mean that you're not interested in other experiences.
No, that's just not right. Everybody tells me that doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, they're wrong. Yeah.
So of these 100,000 games, do you see pretty even play across?
No. Almost everything in life is a, sort of a power curve of, consumption. There's 100,000 games, and 20,000 of them are sort of more amateur games. People learning to make games that are mouse avoiders and other things. And then the top probably 10,000 games have 99% of the plays. Probably the top 5,000 have 98% of the plays, and the revenue is even more concentrated. So. The dynamics that you see in the app stores where, there's a few, people sort of rolling at the top and then, sort of a long tail. It looks a little bit different in other markets, but generally, there are a few games, a few cultural events, movies, whatever, that dominate.
Do those tend to last for a long time?
It depends on the kind of game. So we've got games that have, I'd say the game that's the #1 revenue on our revenue game on our site, which I will not reveal, even if you ask, has been the #1 revenue game on our site since certainly 2013. I think since probably, so it's 3 years. But other games are.
And which one is that?
What?
And which one is that?
Yeah.
How much did it make?
That's not even my numbers to share. But on the other hand, there's smaller single-player games that will pop and a lot of people really enjoy them for a month or 2 months, and then the plays and the interest will die over time. But
have you seen that changing? Have you seen ARPU changing in the games? Because you've been doing this pretty much since the beginning.
Yeah, I'd say the average hasn't changed.
Does it spread out across more games, or are you seeing the same amount of money coming in?
No, I mean we're seeing. I mean, our browser game business has continued to grow, even though browser games are officially dead. And because Flash is dead and Unity is dead, and none of these things are true. The average game doesn't do well, and so it's very hard to change the average.
But you're not cannibalizing; you're actually growing revenue as you grow your game base.
Yeah.
Now, when Dean asked us to name this panel something, we a panel? I keep saying I do, but we're not a panel.
Yeah,
it's
it's a chat.
It's a fireside chat without a fire.
Yep.
So you said that you wanted to call it cross-platform. But you
Or I
told
think,
us,
or multi-platform maybe.
yeah, multi-platform launch
Yeah,
strategy.
yeah.
That sounds really official.
Yeah.
But now you also say you're a browser game. So what platforms are we talking about?
So we're a platform for browser games, and then about starting back towards the end of 2013, we started publishing third-party games for mobile. At this point, we've published around 20. I'm losing count because right now we're launching 2 a month, so the number is incrementing pretty strongly. And over the next few months and years, we're going to be expanding to take our games that we're publishing to as many platforms as possible. So Facebook, Steam, potentially consoles, regional portals, other browser portals.
So how do you determine which games get that kind of treatment?
We both sign games that have already been on web and that we've seen the success of, which is a great way for us to begin a relationship. We date non-exclusively on Kongregate.com and then sign up to help developers take their games to mobile. But we also sign games directly, and it's kind of a painful process where we are
not half as painful as it is for developers.
It's probably I'm sure it's much more painful for developers, but we're working through as a team to see, okay, how many games can we publish in the next year? What types of games do we want to publish? And then drilling down sort of mostly opportunistically with, okay, do we like this game? Do we like this team? Are there any metrics? What do they look like? How can we help them? Because if we can't help a developer, if we can't add value, what's our point? What's the point of even doing it? Then they should.
What is your most cost-effective way to find new players into mobile now?
Let's see. So Kongregate and GameStop channels are obviously.
Is this where we're finding most of them?
It's not the majority. A platform, features from, the true answer is that, features from Apple and Google, which we have, drive, a tremendous amount of free traffic, so that's always going to be great. But we also drive a fair amount from Kongregate, email, through GameStop emails and other.
Right, because the whole CPI Cold War is getting kind of ugly. And I read before that you really draw on your community as well.
Yeah.
Building community is an important part of what you're doing.
Yes. The reason people play games for the feeling of progress and achievement and sort of stimulation and entertainment, but when they really form emotional connections to games is generally when they're connecting to other humans through the game, through communities, chat, etc. So the more that we can add, social features to games in any platform, increases the stickiness and increases their emotional attachment to the game, to the Kongregate brand, and etc.
What's your biggest surprise since you started Kongregate?
My biggest surprise, honestly, the biggest surprise is that we succeeded. When you start off, when you start any company, if you're being realistic about it, the odds that you're going to fail are going to be.
Well, come on, what's it? That's a great answer, and I like that.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah, but
what was the thing?
Okay, the second thing
I can't believe people are doing this shit.
So the truly shocking one, the at first truly shocking one was how much people were spending in free-to-play games. The first time I saw that somebody was spending $1,000 and then $5,000.
So that's not really free to play.
What?
That's wildly expensive play. That's like crack is free to drug. What in this life is free, And essentially, if the best
it was
things
true,
in life are free.
Yeah.
The moon above.
I'm pretty sure you have to buy food to stay alive to see the moon.
Okay.
So, but that was, that was initially very, very shocking to me, especially because we've been thinking about it as microtransactions, and that's how the mentality was. But
Okay, what about the biggest mistake?
biggest mistake. What was the biggest mistake?
Oh, there's so many to pick from.
Yeah. I think probably some early staffing mistakes that we should have been, dealt with a little bit harder. I think that's any new entrepreneur, new manager, is when you know things are going wrong and you know it's not working, and having the courage to really deal with it. There was an early situation that dragged on for probably 7 months past when it should have, and So I've never. I think a few places where I regretted not taking action sooner.
It's hard. People problems are hard.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw something at you before we go to questions.
Okay.
This is another one of your quotes.
Okay.
So we're 3 years into a 5-year prediction that you made on a panel before.
Okay.
This is your life.
Oh my
Emily
God,
Greer.
you're going to totally keep me honest.
Total upheaval in the same directions, a slow decline in the importance of consoles, especially if the trend to very few release continues, continuing growth in mobile and free-to-play virtual goods games, lots of innovation in the indie world and web distribution, but a trend toward publishing publishers and mobile as the cost of acquisition becomes sky high and visibility is problematic.
I said that 3 years ago?
You genius. You did. You said that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Would you still say the same thing?
Let's see. I would. I would say. I'm surprised that it was from 3 years ago, but yeah, I would agree. I think, the continuing innovation in indie is sort of moving towards, like, a lot of that energy is moving towards VR. I would totally.
What about premium mobile?
I think it's been boxed in by the race to the bottom pricing that happened a few years ago. You can't have, once there's a lot of free content, it's going to be very hard to attract a very significant audience to a paid game. There are a lot of people out there. I mean, there's a reasonable number of people out there who will pay for paid games. But if you're getting $1.99 from a relatively limited potential audience, it's very hard to reach a scale that is significant and enough to support.
But wasn't Telltale and Just Two?
Right. And I think what they're doing is great. And what they're doing is figuring out how to charge $19.99 for a game. So Telltale, it's $4.99 per episode, but the full arc is coming together.
Consumers will pay for quality?
Consumers will pay for quality, but the prices have to be higher. I don't think the problem right now is what consumers will pay. It's what they have been conditioned to pay on mobile relative to other platforms, and then also the total fear developers have to charge anything more than what is sort of the official going rate. So for paid on mobile to be really sustainable, I think prices would need to be and vibrant. It would need to be in this sort of similar range that you see on platforms like Steam. So in the $9.99 to $19.99 general range for most titles. And then if you sell 100,000 units, which is there's absolutely 100,000 people who will pay for quality, then you have a reasonable business. But if if 100,000 people pay 99 cents. That's not going to sustain it. That's not going to sustain a studio.
Completely agree. Are there any questions for Emily before we let her go? Because she's really smart and knows an awful lot. We got one in the front here from Dave.
I'm a huge fan of Kongregate. I'm a huge fan of Kongregate. I didn't know you ran it. I was just curious. I'm sure you followed the horribleness that is Gamergate this last year. I was wondering if it's impacted you or your business or your customer base.
Yeah, it didn't really impact, sort of my business or user base very directly, the thing that it actually changed the most for me was the awareness of a lot of men in the industry, and essentially people, even friends and family, of the type of things that are not uncommon for women in the industry to experience. I think the sort of level of vitriol and the level of hate helped bring forward a lot of women telling their stories in a way that I think had been harder. We've been reluctant to do. I think that the biggest change for me is that I've sort of spoken out about various things much more openly in the last year, because it made it even clearer to me that my voice as a woman in the industry is important to raise. Personally, a lot of that type of horribleness and the problems and things that people have talked about have not happened to me for the most part. I came into the industry as the founder of a company. And I came in, with, my brother, who is, a, fraternal force that protects me. But at the same time, a lot of those dynamics that people talk about, including the fact that, until I started speaking at conferences and took over as CEO, even though, Jim and I had been equal partners for, almost the entire history of Kongregate, I was invisible. So. A long answer, but more or less.
Well, thank you. Thank you.